In this video, I'm gonna talk about ELEX 2. My script practically wrote itself. Only 5 minutes in, I knew I was in for a Costco-sized helping of scuff. I knew I would laugh, cry, and often perform both at the same time. All signs pointed to the exact kind of video game you live stream so that both yourself and your audience can witness the jank in real time. I initially had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I did not even remember purchasing the video game in the first place. I can only imagine that it got discounted to rock bottom during a Christmas sale, and I chose to throw caution to the wind, for better or worse. I do not think it even registered in my mind that I was buying something from the makers of Gothic and Risen. It turns out that I did purchase Risen in some distant past, back when TV was still in black and white, and apparently I had played it for 2.5 hours before deciding that it was a lost cause. I do remember briefly trying out Gothic 2, and I remember it simply because I had never gotten the game to even run at a basic level. And now, here I was, repeating history like a long-haul trucker with a Tim Hortons sandwich in his hand after saying never again last week. Maybe processing the experience like I am doing now will finally cement this development studio into my memory once and for all. I guess it can be considered an improvement when I witness the state of the game, and I think to myself, this is gonna be funny, instead of this is gonna suck. The story of ELEX 1 is as follows. A comet landed on the planet and ruined everyone's day. Now, mankind has to somehow pick up the pieces while having regressed in technology and split off into fanatical factions. The comet contained magic blue stones, and everyone got drunk off that sauce until some dude called Jax decided to have a problem with the situation and got to save mankind while he was at it. The story of ELEX 2 is as follows. A bunch of aliens land on the planet and total Jax's life so bad that he starts right back at square one with nothing to his name. Now, on top of the magic blue stones that everybody wants, he also has to convince mankind that maybe they should put a rest to their infighting and focus their attention against the invasion for a little while. Anybody who has been to a congregation of leftists will know right off the bat how much of an uphill battle this can be, but this is a video game, and video game characters can do impossible things. A whole bunch of details get glossed over, and these get pulled up to the surface on a need-to-know basis. If you did not play the previous title, you will come up to somebody and realize the hard way during the first few lines of dialogue that talking to them was a bad idea, and you are about to have a bad time, because he and Jax happily told each other to fuck off in the previous game that you did not play. It becomes readily apparent that the way to victory will be an unpaved rocky road full of potholes and obstacles. In practically everything, there is the hallmark of jank with a capital J. You have barely completed an hour of gameplay that you come across your son, and look at him. Look at the guy. That kid is paying taxes. That kid just got back from his second job in Alabama. That kid is 12 to 40 years old, and he simply does not need any of this right now. It sets the tone for an experience that consistently showcases grandiose ambition and then proceeds to curb its enthusiasm after reality ensues far harder than expected. The aspects that do go all the way end up doing it in a comically misguided fashion, in which it feels like several teams worked on different parts, but they never really spoke to one another. I can get Jax to threaten to ruin somebody's shit completely unprovoked and then see him unconditionally forgive a despicable offense, all in the span of one conversation before I have even had any input on the dialogue choices. It feels like the actors had to record their lines on different days of the week from opposite sides of the continent and without any information on what they were responding to. I am not even certain that they were given their lines in order. And then there is the aspect of getting the play moving along. It is not exactly broken, but I can fully understand somebody taking a wrong turn somewhere and declare the whole thing to be a lost cause. At the same time, I can understand somebody getting lucky in where they go, and they fall under the illusion that all is great and good. Both of the situations are true at the same time, they meet in the middle, and they produce a bizarre conflagration of active mediocrity. This game is what happens when you listen to Derek Smart for more than 5 minutes. This game is what happens when you train your AI on fanfiction.com. This game is like, what if Stellantis was a dev studio? This game is what happens when your D20 keeps lending on a 10. This game is what happens when you put the Canadian government in charge. This game is what happens when you phone it in with an auto dialer. This game is what happens when you find out mid-development that your dreams of making a blockbuster MMO will never come true. This game is like Chapter 1, updated 7 years ago. This game is what happens when you cannot find your exact make and model at Kenny U Pull. This game is what happens when your sports team plays for 500. This game is what happens when you have a bouncing DVD logo for a manager. This game is what happens when your favorite color is brown. This game is what happens when your artistic inspiration comes from Shutterstock. This game is what happens when you take everything CodeMiko says to the first degree. This game is what happens when you take the free version of online courses. This game is what happens when you still give Tim Hortons your business in the year of our Lord. This game is what happens when you use your bank as a financial advisor. This game is what happens when you found the how to make a 3-cheese blend video helpful. This game is what happens when you eat at a restaurant whose name is written in papyrus font. This game is what happens when you believe that Johnny Walker, Jim Beam, and Jack Daniels are the 3 greatest men who ever lived. This game is what happens when the NIMBYs defeat the local mass transit project. This game is what happens when you try to sing outside of the shower. This game is what happens when you fail to call your telecom's loyalty department every year. Not to say that everything is inherently broken beyond repair, but many things are damaged and should be repaired. The plotline and the side quests are as solid as a flag football belt. The combat controls are as responsive as a teenager on the graveyard shift at the corner store. I found the best way to fight was to sneak in a quick hit or two, then roll out of the way and never make use of the parry mechanic, all while I use my companion as a way to get some extra hits in there whenever the companion AI does not attempt to channel the spirit of a stormtrooper. At the end of the day, you yourself are the deciding factor in everything. And although it is not exactly a surprise to anyone, the surprise is in how your companions try so hard and yet fail so much in everything they do. They get relegated to the role of distraction, and if you can get them to pull the enemy's attention towards them, you can go hog wild from the back with a full combo. Go figure why. The game is incredibly stingy on tooltips, and although it gives away some tutorial information, it took me an embarrassingly long time before I found out I had a built-in flashlight. It is activated with the V key. Or that you can use your jetpack and literally melee some flying enemies in midair with a homing attack. It sounds really obvious in hindsight, but in the heat of a battle where 2 or 3 hits are enough to kill you, I can understand somebody reaching for their pistol out of decades of video game reflex. The weirdest surprise out of the bunch is that if the game does not warn you that you are about to steal something, you can pick up everything you find in total impunity. It does not matter if somebody yells in your direction about it. The worst they can do is be angry for a couple seconds, and meanwhile you can just rob the entire house blind. If it is marked fair game, then you are golden. You are actively encouraged to pick up literally everything you can, because every item you pick up is either a crafting material or is a piece of junk to sell for pocket money. You can get to the end game with 50 swords and battle axes in your back pocket. You can carry more than 5,000 cigarettes up your ass and nobody bats an eye about it. Grabbing everything in sight is one of the soundest strategies, quite simply because the crafting system makes it so that you can cannibalize a handful of broken weapons to craft a legitimate one that does better damage. 3 weapons of the same type are needed, and just like in McDonald's Monopoly, you will only have 2 out of 3 most of the time. To get your job done, you will have to fight a lot and talk a lot. And the order in which you do things is so permissive that you can afford to put a pin on your current task and go elsewhere if you want a change in scenery. Leveling up does not necessarily imply a hard specialization. Instead, it allows more and more options, and nothing is ever truly closed off. You can be balls deep into outputting as much raw physical damage as you can, but nothing stops you from putting that on pause to work on some different abilities, and you will still remain viable across the board while you work on that. There is always a large pressure to improve, quite simply because it is the primary way to open up the rest of a game world that starts off as deeply hostile in nearly every aspect. The environment does not contain beef gates so much as beef lighthouses. You can usually sneak or blow right past some of the bigger dangers, at least until you become powerful enough that you choose to go through the beef gate instead of around it. It is a bit of a counterintuitive design as of September 2023. The conventional wisdom is that stupidly overpowered enemies are the game's way of telling the player that he is not ready for that part of the world yet. But it does not work that way here. The easy and the tough enemies are scattered around in the fuzzy kind of way that never truly indicates whether or not you are in the newbie area. The truth of the matter is that there is no newbie area. The more you level up, the safer the world becomes. Not just because you become more powerful, but also because you literally remove dangers from the world you explore. This is not like the Elder Scrolls, in which you have easy travel freedom from the get-go and the enemies level up alongside you. In ELEX, the environment's population is a static variable in the world's great equation. That giant cyclops will still be there 10 hours later, and you will be able to fight him and check off that icon on your map. The more you go along, the more you kind of clean up the world around you. I am not entirely certain as to whether or not the game reseeds new enemies to replace the ones you have killed. If it does, it sprinkles a pinch of the weaker ones to break up the moments when you are running from one place to another. In the same way, the items on the ground have been scattered around in a way that feels deliberate. I am certain that there have been some helper tools in the background to make the job easier, but still, you find the broom in the broom closet. You find the lettuce in the garden basket. You find the toilet paper in the bathroom. You find the uniquely named powerful sword inside of the bandit camp that made you die a dozen times. And the world is a continuous affair that has been made out of one single piece. There are no dungeons or separate levels. The only obvious loading that happens is when you teleport across the world. The environment lends itself to exploration. You can choose to run off the road and check out the building you just saw. At worst, you will find a bit of junk to offload on the traders. At best, you might just find a unique piece of gear, like the sunglasses that highlight nearby items you can pick up. There is no procedural generation at work. Everything is placed the same way for everyone, and the internet even has a map of where the goodies are, should you run out of patience. The points of interest can feel a little similar sometimes, but they are never exactly the same. And when they are done, they are done. Once you have raided the building and picked it clean, it remains that way for the rest of the game. Sometimes you come across a tiny little story explained without words. You witness the skeleton hugging a toaster in a bathtub, or the dilapidated vehicle whose horn keeps going and going and going. The more you discover the world, the more you can get pleasantly lost into it. There is something that feels good about knowing that the game world is not a theme park of infinitely hollow, repeating experiences. The object permanence is a comforting beacon of reality. The grand constructor of this world was a mechanist who put all the parts into place, and then left all of those parts to run their course. It brings about the question that comes again and again. What will I find if I go over there? It might be a new place to explore. It might be a mission that fires off under the guise of a seemingly chance encounter. In some cases, it might be meeting a new character altogether. A character with a name and a personality, and a chance to be remembered. It is even possible to complete missions before they have even been assigned to you. You have a space in your pocket specifically for those quest items that mean nothing to you right now, but will mean something once you run into the character who needs them. There are even dialogue lines for when you have already done the thing that is just now being requested of you. In some cases, the quest entities do not appear until you take it on, but most of the time you just so happen to run across something that had a significance to somebody, somewhere. There is a palpable attention to detail. It is not always where one expects it. It is an aspect that emerges from hours upon hours of basking into the world. Nearly 80 hours, to be precise. Hours upon hours of dying for terrible reasons, and of throwing the perfect grenade that sends everything flying. Hours of taking on an impossible enemy, and coming out victorious after your 7th attempt. Hours of obeying your wanderlust, and discovering new little places. The efforts all express love. Love in that misguided way whose roots are anchored in the decades past. Before they changed what it was. Before what was it has become weird and scary. It is the kind of love that, no matter what, comes from the heart. That love is genuine, and it does its best to show itself even when the whirlwind of today makes it difficult. This game loves me, the player, and for that, I will be forever grateful, long after its passing.
At least now I can keep an eye on him.
You know I can hear you, right?
In short, this game is a forward from Grandma.